and welcome to the Doofcast, the official variety podcast of doofmedia.com. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Matt Freeman.
They call me Mr. Glass.
Who does?
The kids.
Why?
I don't know.
Okay. This week on the show, we continue our deep dive into the films of M. Night Shyamalan with his second movie, the year 2000's Unbreakable. This is a full spoilers discussion of the movie, so everyone go watch it first. And you should do that because it's a really good movie.
Yeah.
And then Matt, we're going to talk a little bit about the new Joker trailer, and then I have a movie I want to recommend to everyone.
All right, sounds good. Let's get into it.
So that's the episode. That's
cool.
what we're doing. It's
All
very
right.
exciting.
Perfect.
All right, let's jump right into Unbreakable right now.
Hi. You're in the emergency room of the Philadelphia City Hospital. I'm gonna ask you some questions. Where were you sitting on the train?
Against the window.
In the passenger car?
Yes.
You're certain you were in the passenger car?
Yeah. Where are the other passengers?
Your train derailed. Took a curve too fast. A second train collided with yours after it derailed. The debris spread over 1 mile.
Why are you looking at me like that?
There are two reasons why I'm looking at you like this. One, because it seems you are the only survivor of this train wreck. And two, you don't have a scratch on you.
All right, Matt. So The Sixth Sense comes out in 1999. A year and a few months later, M. Night Shyamalan is back with his second movie, Unbreakable. A much more polarizing movie than The Sixth Sense was, and I think we're going to be saying that about just about every single one of M. Night's movies from now on.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that this movie already is starting to have some of the things in it that people don't like about his movies that were, like, interestingly not present in The Sixth Sense. And I don't know. I mean, I don't want to start off the conversation saying negative things, but I will remark, like, I would place several of his later movies higher than this one in my preference ordering.
Interesting.
But there's still a lot of great stuff to say about this movie, of course.
Yeah, I hope we get into why exactly that is, because I'm curious to hear that. Did you see this movie when it came out?
I think I did. I've seen it once, and I thought that I saw it in theaters. I might have, like, blockbustered it shortly after, but I definitely saw it around the time it came out. Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely saw this one in theaters. I remember because my aunt and uncle were in town with my cousin. We went and saw this movie, and I remember the opening crawl. You know, the movie opens, and there's that crawl about comic books.
Yeah.
And I remember my cousin turning to me and going, "What the fuck are we watching?" Because that's the thing about this movie, and I went back and confirmed this by watching the trailer. Nothing in this movie told anything about the comic book stuff. Nothing in the advertisement for this movie told anything comic book related. Remember, this was the year 2000. Spider-Man wasn't out yet. I think the first X-Men movie had maybe come out. I don't remember exactly when that movie came out.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
But this was pre the comic book explosion. This was pre all of that. And you can tell in the advertising that they are very aware that will scare people away. So they buried any of that. The opening, the only thing that the trailer does is say the basic premise, which is that there's this guy, David Dunn. He's on a train riding home to Philadelphia. The train derails. Everybody on the train dies except for him. And he's left miraculously unharmed. And he's trying to figure out why that is. And that's all the trailer talked about at all. It was just setting up that basic premise, which is cool. But, like, you know, it's only because they were afraid of showing all the... It's not because they were, like, really good at trailer editing. It's just because they were afraid to show the rest of the movie.
Yeah, and you could also kind of flip it and phrase it as, like, calling it comic book related would not have been a selling point back then. Like
Right.
Nowadays, that would almost be a selling point.
Yeah.
You put that front and center because you would get a certain demographic. You'd be like, oh, Shyamalan's making a comic book movie. I mean, that's basically what they did with, some of his later movies. Because
with Glass for sure.
Yeah, because they kind of changed, the whole milieu had changed.
Yeah.
But also, like, there is a sense in which this isn't even actually a superhero comic book movie. Like, it's about a crazy guy who thinks that he's living in a comic book, but actually it's just about it's a film length episode of the X-Files, actually.
Right.
About a guy who's unusually durable. Like, because that's, I mean, okay, I guess he has the psychic power also, but like Mr. Glass is not actually a supervillain. He's just a guy with a genetic disorder whose mind has broken due to the suffering and the unfairness incurred upon him. And it's really a really interesting kind of, I think I overuse the word deconstruction, but it's anything but an attempt to make a straight up normal superhero movie.
I mean, that's true. This is interesting because I think we kind of disagree on something, and that doesn't happen very often. I totally agree with you that is what this movie is, but I also think it's operating on two levels, because I think on the second level, it is just a comic book movie, and the twist of the story to me is not Elijah's the bad guy. That is a twist in the movie, but the twist of the story to me is that while this is a movie operating at the level you just said, it is actually just like the first act of a comic book story. It is the origin story of a comic book superhero. Yeah.
So I don't disagree with that, actually. So I'm gonna, maybe we don't disagree. It'll be interesting to find out if we.
Damn it!
I mean, I'd love for us to disagree. Let me continue a bit. So I think, to elaborate a bit, pretty much everything except like the plot that you would sketch out and put on Wikipedia is like making the opposite choices of what you would make for a superhero movie. Like, everything from like the color palette in this movie is like the bottom of my shoe. The pacing is very, very slow, in a good way usually. Because his scenes are interesting enough. There's enough going on that you're not bored, but the pacing is undoubtedly slow. There's a couple of what you might call B plots, with one with his son and one with his wife, and they're basically two separate side plots that flesh out his character. The nature of his character is just this very taciturn, not very emotive, kind like almost a boring character. But I mean, I guess Bruce Willis brings a certain charisma to it. But if you just look at how the character is written and what the like what the character's lines are, it's very, very minimal in terms of character. Okay, and then we move later into the movie. So to recap, I'm pointing out things that are anathema to making a superhero movie. So as the film ends, like he finds the guy who's really bad, who's bad enough that he's going to track him down and try to stop him. And the guy's already like orphaned 2 children. And I remembered when I first saw this movie, like there was like no feeling of triumph at the end of this movie. And I pretty much feel the same now. But I remember feeling like really just down and depressed at how this movie ends, because it's like, oh, he saved the kids. Their parents are dead now. That's horrible.
Yeah, but he saved the kids.
He did, but what I'm saying is, I'm not saying like therefore it's bad or anything. I'm saying if this were a normal superhero movie, pretty much in any of the franchises ever since like the first Batman movie in 1980 or whatever that was, he would have successfully saved everyone.
Mm-hmm.
He would have saved everyone, and there wouldn't be a corpse on the stairs and another corpse that he unties, and then she like slumps over stiffly because she's dead. So like these are just the type of like bleakness and terribleness is very, very unusual for a superhero movie. And that's the thing, is it's just not. It's almost like a supernatural horror movie that has the plot of a of a comic book movie, but also not at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the structure is a comic book movie, right? Like, I mean, the overarching structure, like you said, like the Wikipedia summary would read like a standard origin story. But I
Yeah.
agree that it is something else. And I think that's why the Elijah reveal at the end of the movie that actually he's the villain works. Because if you believed you were in a comic book movie, not just watching a movie about someone who believes they're in a comic book, you would probably spot the Elijah turn from a mile away, because it would be very, very obvious if you actually thought this is a comic book film. And I actually wonder, someone watching this movie for the first time today, when comic books have taken over pop culture, if they would be much more willing to buy into the fact that, oh, this is just another comic book movie, and the Elijah turn wouldn't work on them as much. I wonder if the movie's good enough at deflecting that feeling that it still works as a twist at the end. I don't know.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I feel like there's a good chance that the twist would still be effective, because the movie actually spends a lot of time on Elijah as a character and doesn't tip its hand. It's you feel for him, and you believe that he is single-mindedly fixated on this idea of finding the superhero, and it all makes sense, right? Like,
right. His motivation is actually, I think, very. Yeah, he's clearly nuts, right?
Yeah.
But his motivation is actually like, I'm not like that line at the end. I'm not a mistake. You have proven that I am not a mistake. I am here for a purpose. I'm not just crippled and disabled just for the cruelty of nature. It's this is my purpose. This is my reason to exist.
Yeah.
And I like that a lot.
Yeah, right.
I mean, and that's true on the other side too. That's what I like about this movie, is it's very reflective, right? Both characters play off each other in every way, and the movie kind of plays off that. And we'll talk about all the ways in which I think the structure and the directing sells that. But I mean, that's kind of the movie.
Yeah. Let's talk about the directing a bit, because I think I kind of said what I had to say about it being like intentionally crafted to be the anti-superhero movie while simultaneously having the plot of a superhero movie. But yeah, I think talking about the directing is kind of why we're here. So yeah.
I mean, I think that's part of the directing, though, the structure and everything you said. I guess I'll start with the use of color, because you said this is a very drab movie, and you're right. You're totally right. But it does this thing that I really like, where it'll have a really drab scene, but it'll put like a spot of bright color in it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's something that comic books actually do a lot. Probably to save money on inking, they have like one thing in the scene that it's very bright. And the opening scene actually has that in the little girl that he's sitting on the train, and he sees this little girl between the seats, and she's like wearing very bright colors, like brighter than like any other color in this whole movie this little girl is wearing. And I think that's a great example of what it's done throughout this whole movie. And I mean, I think it's very fitting to our talk about The Sixth Sense, where he used that color red in a very specific way. He uses colors in a very specific way here. David Dunn's color is green, and Elijah's color is purple.
Yeah.
And those are kind of everything around them is constructed around those colors. And also, one thing I noticed this time is that the colors around David change as he goes through the story. He goes kind of from colder to warmer by the end of the story, whereas Elijah goes from warmer to colder by the end of the story. Just like the general color palette in the scenes around them. I mean, from the first moment we start, when David's on the train, all the color is very, very, very muted, very drab, nothing to it. And then by the end of that scene, when he's laying in bed with his wife saying, I had a nightmare, it's like so much warmer. All the color is like, the color has like come back into the scene. I think that's a really fantastic way of showing these two characters' arcs, and also how they kind of crisscross.
Yeah, that's true. And then in the scene where, you're basically you've witnessed Elijah's, first moments of life, it's like this warm kind of maternal environment.
Yeah.
And then he becomes more alienated. And I mean, he's doing worse and worse as the movie goes along too.
Yeah.
So
he's literally breaking down. Yeah.
Yeah. That's one way in which the misdirect works, is like you're reading his breakdown as just being like, oh yeah, well he's falling apart. But actually it's also conveying, like, kind of showing what's actually under the surface with him.
Yeah, one other thing I noticed in the structure of how it reinforces that is Elijah has a flashback very early in the movie where he flashes back to his childhood when he gets his first comic, because that's kind of like the defining moment of his life is when he gets his first comic. David Dunn also has a flashback, but it's at the end of the movie, and it's when he like fakes his injury and he's coming to that realization, so he flashed back to it. And I wonder like if those are set like equal distance from the beginning and the end, to where it's like the movie is almost literally mirroring each other. And I don't know that for sure, but that's what it feels like.
Yeah, it kind of does feel that way. Like, because when the movie starts, you could be, feeling like this is going to be a movie about Elijah, because the first scene is when he's a baby.
Yeah.
And then we switch to Bruce Willis, and I totally forgot this, but like he's super unlikable in his first scene.
Oh my God. Can we talk about that first scene
absolutely,
forever?
Yes.
So I guess the first thing I want to talk about is M. Night is doing the exact same thing he did in The Sixth Sense. And I'm so glad we watched that movie with the level of detail we did, because you can see all his signs, right?
Yeah.
Like the very first scene with these two characters is a long take where he's panning back and forth between the two characters, just like that dinner scene in The Sixth Sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're absolutely right. The first thing we see him do in this movie is hit on this woman, see this woman, like eye her midriff. And I love how the camera like pans to her midriff and that tattoo. And it's almost like the scene's really interesting, Matt, because everything we're seeing is between two seat cushions.
Yeah.
And the movie has defined that there's a little girl sitting there, because like he looks and sees this little girl, and then it cuts to almost as if we're in her perspective. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like we're being a little voyeuristic here. But the camera, like in that one moment, like looks at her midriff, and it was to the point where it's uncomfortable, where it's like very obvious that Bruce Willis is like just leering at her.
Right.
And then the first thing he does after he sees that is pocket his wedding ring.
Right.
And this is our protagonist.
Yeah, no, I when I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, I remember. This is one of my, like, I don't want to call it a problem with the movie, but like it was one of the things that like surprised me to the point of being distracted, of just like, God, I don't like this character immediately. Yeah. Like, and I think maybe even as a kid when I first saw it, I didn't really understand what the dynamic was, because I mean, basically, him and his wife are having such problems that they're essentially separated. But you don't find that out until later, intentionally. So the movie is letting you think that, oh, this guy is just a piece of shit, basically.
Yeah.
And basically letting you, and it takes its sweet time in making you not think he's a piece of shit, because he wakes up, he seems to not. So there's the accident, right? After he continues to be a creep. With the woman, there's the accident. He wakes up, is actually really just like numb, and thus comes off as being really cold.
Yeah.
Regarding the fact that all these people died, and then like his wife comes out and like doesn't show him any affection.
I loved that.
He doesn't show her any affection, and they like drop hands as soon as the boy turns his back. Like, these are all amazing details.
Oh, it's such a good show don't tell moment, right?
Yeah.
Because the kid stands up and rushes towards him and like jumps into his arms and hugs him, and then the wife just casually walks, and the kid actually puts their hands together.
Yeah,
he picks up both their hands, puts them together, and then the second he turns away, they drop them. And that is a perfect. You didn't have to say a line of dialogue there. We understand the dynamic of this relationship perfectly.
Yeah. I don't even remember when the movie starts making us actually think maybe he's okay. It takes a while though, right? Like, I think it probably has to do with his son. Maybe his relationship with his son isn't great either.
It's not great, but it's like, I mean, that's David Dunn's problem, is he has distanced himself from the world because he's miserable. He's depressed and he doesn't understand why. He doesn't know what to do. And he's just kind of pulled back and collapsed in on himself. And it's hurting everyone around him. He's a security guard, which I don't want to disparage that job, but that's like, he's trying to get a job in New York, but we don't actually learn what that job is. I think it's just another security job. He seems completely satisfied. He doesn't really want anything else. His kid loves him. Like, there's so many scenes in this movie, Matt, where two scenes with his kid sleeping in bed with him.
Yeah.
The one I really love is he's sitting there reading the newspaper, and then the newspaper drops down, and we see the kid is hugging him while asleep, and he's just so kind of indifferent to the kid. And I mean, that's to me, that's the emotional core of this movie, is the scene between David and his son, and the reforming of that bond through the superhero stuff.
Right, and like you said, the boy is so desperate and like basically already believes his dad is a superhero even before there's any evidence whatsoever. He just completely idolizes him, and yeah, I mean he doesn't treat the kid super great. It's interesting. I'm trying to think because this viewing eventually I came around to like wanting him to win. I don't know if I think that might have been my issue with this movie, and like the reason why I watched it once and then didn't watch it again until 2019 is that I just didn't like the character at all. But this time I did, so I'm trying to figure out why that is. Actually, I don't have a good answer for that.
I think there's like, I don't want to like assume to know you or anything, but I think there's something, especially when you're younger, that you kind of romanticize relationships in a way that taking off your wedding ring to flirt with someone is like the worst thing ever. Whereas maybe we're a little older now, understanding the idea of a difficulty in marriage, right?
Yeah.
That your marriage is falling apart. For all intents and purposes, it might just be over.
Yeah.
And the thing I like about, like, yes, taking off your wedding ring and flirting with someone else is a jerk move, but he's so bad at it. I think that's what, like, that's why I was like, I ended up being okay with it, is because he's just this kind of blubbering, awkward mess. Like, I loved Bruce Willis's performance in this because he's like trying really hard to talk to her and he keeps fucking up. Like, the first thing he does is pull out this In Style magazine and it's like, here, there's this magazine for you. And she's like, can I see the other one? And it's the ESPN magazine, because she's a sports agent.
Right.
And then he's like, just like he'll say something to her, and then like halfway through his line, he'll just like start mumbling the rest of it really quietly. He's just like a mess. It's just a terrible job at everything, to the point where she gets so uncomfortable that she's just like, I gotta go.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that makes sense, actually. Like, not just the desanctification of marriage in a sense, but also like the idea that when you're an adult, you've probably been through at least one period of your life where you were kind of depressed in one way or another.
Yeah.
And so it's much easier to empathize with a character who's like that and to be like, oh yeah, I see what the movie's doing with this character, and I can connect to that. I can connect to that in a number of ways. Whereas when you're a kid, you're like, this character's boring and I don't like him. Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, and I do think you're supposed to be really disappointed with him by the end of that scene. I think you're probably not supposed to like him very much, and because the whole scene before we go to the part where the actual train crashes, at the very end of that scene, which is a long oneer with the camera going back and forth between the two of them, it cuts again to the little girl who we've established as basically the point of view character in that shot, and she just gives him this look of sheer disappointment.
Yeah.
And she's us, right? Because we just saw the whole scene through her eyes. So like that's how we're supposed to be feeling. This like, you asshole. And I think that carries through for a while. I think you're right that like it's a good way of establishing like how messed up this guy is, and it's again, I think, mirrored in Elijah's arc, where he kind of goes from the kind of lovable cares for this guy and wants to help him through this time to the bad guy, whereas David's going from like kind of a jerky, indifferent asshole to the hero.
Another great thing about that first scene, which only becomes evident on a rewatch, I think, or if you happen to have a particularly good memory, I guess, is that the woman is not just physically attractive to him, but also she's like a football sports agent. She's like the opposite of what his wife is, which is someone for whom football is like this symbol of hurting your body for no reason. Yeah. And like, it's almost like you can imagine him thinking like, oh, this is what I could have, this is what my life could have been like. I could have been with a sports agent who would have encouraged because she says that, and then he says something like, oh really? And then like there's a long pause, and I'm just imagining him like thinking about all these things. It's weird because it comes at the beginning of the movie when you don't know any of this context. But I mean, Shyamalan definitely intended it to be a contrast.
Well, another thing it does, I have no idea if this was intentional or not, but it really jumped out at me this time. She asks him, "Do you like football?" And he answers, "Not really,"
Right.
which is a lie. We know it's a lie. And the second that happens, the train rumbles, like the train goes into a tunnel. So like it rumbles and there's darkness and noise. And I don't know, like that feels like an intentional move, right? Like they decided when the train was going to go in the tunnel right after he told this thing that we learn is not true at all.
Yeah. I like that.
And we learn he's a security guard at a football stadium.
Right. And
so like he chose his wife over football, but he got as like close to it as he possibly could.
Yeah. And you're speaking about the nature of the security guard job. I think it's more the fact that he's had the same job for like 20 years or something that makes you think that basically he's kind of given up.
Yeah, that's true. It's not the job by itself, but I think you're right that is it the school that he went to? I don't know if it ever says that specifically.
I don't know if it says that specifically, but I think you could, well, maybe it was a professional stadium. I don't know. I have no idea.
No, it was definitely it was a
college stadium.
It was a college stadium for sure.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm not sure.
I think we can say that with relative certainty.
Because we know his son is going to the same school that he went to as a kid. So
right.
The implication being he hasn't moved at all in his life. So, yeah. Yes.
So one other directing decision I want to talk to you about here. There's this scene that ends up being really important, I think. It's one of the first times we meet Elijah as an adult, where he is showing off so first we see this comic book that he's given. We go to the flash book when his mom gives him a comic book, and the camera does this really cool thing. I don't know if you remember it, Matt. First of all, the first time we see the comic book, it's upside down, and Knight actually does that a lot in this movie, of things upside down. Like when his son is watching the TV, he's laying down and the TV is upside down,
right.
And this comic book is upside down, and other things are upside down. And I think that's a very intentional move that we're kind of showing how things aren't right, maybe
being disoriented and
yeah. And I think the cool thing that this movie does though is the comic book's upside down. The kid grabs it to turn it right side up, but instead of just letting that happen, the camera like turns with it. So even when the kid has finished turning the comic book where it's right side up for him, the camera, it's still upside down, and then the camera swings around finally and shows the comic book right side up, and we flash forward to that same image, but like a professional, like his original, the artist's original drawing, and Elijah's now trying to sell it to someone in his store. And I just think that's like such a fascinating touch, like to do. It's almost as if like the movie is saying, no, this can't be right side up yet. I'm not ready for it yet. I just love it. I love that little touch there.
Yeah, I love that because you can definitely read into it. I was gonna say, I mean, you're only now pointing this out to me, so I haven't thought about it too much. But I was gonna say, like, when the comic book comes into his life, it rearranges his perspective, literally.
Yeah,
like that's the symbol of it. I can't really imagine why like the boy is watching TV upside down. I guess well, he's watching the TV, and that's how he learns about the train crash.
Right.
So that's how the superhero element enters his life.
Yeah,
so,
that's a really good point. I like that.
So in both cases, you're seeing how the supernatural enters their life, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we go to the scene, and he's basically trying to sell this image to just a random guy, and I love the construction of the scene. And this is one of my get really nerdy about things, because the scene starts and all we see is the picture, right? In the center of the frame is the comic book drawing, and to the left and right of the frame are Elijah on the left and this random man on the right. But we're just seeing the reflections, right? We're seeing the reflections in the glass of the frame that's surrounding this drawing. And they're not even in focus at the beginning. It's just focused on the thing. Then at the very end of the conversation, it comes in focus on the two of them. And I think this movie does a lot of really cool things with left and right, because in the comic book photo, we have the hero on the left and we have the villain on the right. And we talk about how the hero is square jawed. The villain has a head that's slightly bigger. and we've positioned them left and right. And I think the cool thing about the scene is at the beginning of it, Elijah's on the left, the guy's on the right, and we're like, oh, that makes sense because Elijah's like the comic book guy, and this guy turns out to be kind of an asshole because he wants to buy his 4-year-old son a very expensive piece of art. Like I actually don't understand why he would want to buy that at all. I'm kind of on Elijah's side there. But the cool thing it does is because this is a reflection, their positions are actually the opposite. That Elijah is actually on the right side of the comic book the whole time. Because when we cut away from the reflection, Elijah's on the right because it was just a reflection.
Yeah.
And I love that little detail. And it actually does something that you're not supposed to do in movies. It breaks a rule, Matt. It breaks a movie rule.
Yeah.
Because I think we've talked about the 180 degree rule before, haven't we?
We have, but it's one of those things where I know what it is and then I forget what it is because it's complicated, but yeah.
So we'll do a quick refresher on it. Basically, the idea of this rule is if you have a scene with one character on the left side of the frame and the other character on the right side of the frame, imagine an imaginary 180 degree line that goes through the scene. And the point is you should not move your camera or cut to another angle that crosses this line. Basically, the idea is cutting from character on left to character on right suddenly is disorienting and weird for the audience. Even if they don't recognize what happens, it just kind of disorients you. It makes you, like, you lose the geography of the scene a little bit.
Yeah.
But like anything in movies, this is not a steadfast rule. This is a guideline. This is something you shouldn't do unless you have a reason to. And that's exactly what this movie does, is because it cuts back and forth between Elijah on the left to Elijah on the right, because it cuts to like perspective of the painting. So he's standing on the right side, then it cuts to the perspective of the painting, and he's suddenly on the left. And it is jarring, it is weird, but it's intentional, and I love it.
Yeah, that's, I mean, to get just a little bit meta here for a second, I think it's really fascinating how as you watch more and more movies, you actually do learn the language of film subconsciously, because you don't necessarily notice. I mean, the average person who's seen a lot of movies doesn't necessarily know what the 180 degree rule is, but they will notice some shots as being surprising, but not be able to put their finger on why.
Yeah.
And the reason is usually something along these lines. Something like, you know, you almost blink for a second, or your brain kind of like takes an extra, you know, quarter of a second to process the scene rather than just doing it kind of automatically, because the filmmaker has made some choice that violates what you have learned the rules are. And Shyamalan's doing it on purpose here. And it is probably affecting you subconsciously, even if you don't recognize that that's what he's doing.
Absolutely. I really think like 70% of film criticism is just putting words to things that people feel, but they don't know how to explain why they feel them.
Sure. I mean, I think I would say that's true of most criticism, because you're saying this, a lot of it is just saying this is what is happening. Yeah.
I think moviegoers are very smart. I mean, they have had film language drilled into them. The part where they struggle is putting words to why they feel that way. And I think that's where film criticism and people that study film and do this thing pick up that slack. So I think that's why people read reviews after they leave movies, is not to be told whether the movie's good or not, because they've seen it, they know for themselves. But maybe if I didn't like that movie, why? Why didn't I like that movie? Why didn't this scene emotionally connect for me? Like, why? There's two characters, it's a really dramatic scene. Why am I not feeling this? It usually has something to do with decisions made in the cinematic language.
Yeah.
And the same is true for the opposite. If a scene really works for you, there's decisions made in editing and in cinematography and in music and coloring and all in lighting and all this stuff that endears you to the movies. And I do think M. Night is very aware of all those things and uses them to their fullest extent.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we had quite a tangent last Shyamalan episode talking about the scene where, you know, the dinner table scene where the camera's wandering back and forth. And I think you're exactly right. He does a very similar thing in this movie with that train scene, except it's even weirder because there's the seat in the middle. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, I mean, you can say exactly why he's breaking this rule. He's trying to create this sense of, like you said, voyeurism. He's creating a sense that you're peeking in on something that this guy is trying to hide and be sneaky.
Yeah.
And not above board, manipulative, basically, in a word, unlikable. And then he's going to play with that. He's going to play with that preconception that he's created.
Yep. And he continues to do it all throughout the movie. There is, like we talked about, the left and right thing, and really throughout a lot of this movie, if Elijah and David are in a scene together, David's normally on the left, Elijah's normally on the right. I really think the only time it breaks this rule is when they have like come to actually believe that all this is wrong and he's not actually the hero they thought he was. Then it switches for a while, which I think is a really good touch. I can't back that up 100% because I've only watched it. I would have to watch it like 3 more times and write down every time a character is on one side or the other. But I notice that more often than not. The cinematography really likes David left side of the frame and Elijah right side of the frame, which works with that comic book we saw.
Yeah. Is there more than that one really obvious fisheye lens use? Because then I was trying to figure out if there's any, like, what it's distracting. So I was trying to figure out.
Where is it again? Remind me.
He's basically just David's just walking like through the hallway and then to the staircase in his house, and the fisheye lens is placed such that on half of the, you can see like all the way down one hallway into the other room, and then you can see all the way up the stairs. I mean, one thing that it does, I guess, is it gives you a really solid sense of the geography of his house. Mm-hmm. Like it's sort of the equivalent of picking like the most like the, every house kind of has a point where it's kind of the center of the house. Yeah. And then it's giving you this fisheye perspective from that point. But it was distracting to me enough where I was like, fisheye lens.
Where in the movie was it? I honestly can't remember.
Toward the beginning. I'm pretty sure that's what it is, because his body is literally like distorted as he walks across the frame.
I mean, if it's picking up down 2 different hallways at the same time, that's the kind of lens it is. It's super wide. Yeah. I mean, I think it wants to give you the space and make the space feel a little uncomfortable because his home life is uncomfortable.
Yeah, that makes sense, because in that particular scene, that is one of the ones where like it's obvious that him and his wife are like stalking around the house like strange cats.
Yeah.
And
did you notice like his wife is staying in like the living room or something?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if she was sleeping in like the guest bedroom or something, and he was sleeping in the.
It's a fold-out bed, like it's a fold-out couch that she's sleeping on, and he's sleeping upstairs in the master, which I thought was and that's confirmed at the end of the movie when he picks her up and walks her up the stairs to their room and lays her down.
Yeah,
and I just thought it was very interesting that like maybe I'm being sexist, but like I'm so used to that like man has to sleep in the uncomfortable place.
No, I mean, my reading of it was that she was basically so my reading of it was she was the one who was
like instigated the.
Yes, she was the instigator of this isn't working out and I don't want to sleep in the same bed as you. But and when you pull that move, you can't get out of my bed. You go sleep somewhere else. So yeah, basically I saw that as pretty straightforwardly, like that was the indicator of. In fact, I think that's the movie once again showing don't telling, like, yeah, maybe he's taking off his wedding ring and being a little bit skeezy, but she's the one who was kicked out of the bedroom, as it were.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That's true. Yeah. And I love that scene where she knocks on the door with her decision, right?
Yeah.
I think that's such an emotionally impactful scene where she's like, just tell me first, have you been with anybody? And in the back of your head, you're like, well, not for lack of trying, buddy. Right. But I did believe him in that moment where he said that. Like, I did believe that he hadn't been with anyone. Not that it matters or anything. I love that.
Right. Yeah. Not that it's not important. It's not going to change anything. Right. Yeah. I thought that was a heartbreaking scene, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and she used it's so funny because you're absolutely right that there's like two different movies going on here, because the one movie is him trying to discover this hidden part of himself, but to her it's like, I almost just lost this guy. And like the train crash is for her a miracle that gives her an opportunity to try again.
Yeah.
And it's kind of heartbreaking because she's the one that instigated this. She's the one that says she wants to try again. But the movie really implies that none of this is her fault. That it is him. It is him and his depression, in his removal of himself from the world, that has caused all this.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's really, I don't think anything that she does that gets him, like, I mean, I think it is pretty interesting because, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not like he decides like, I'm going to go be a hero so that I can cure my depression so that I can get my wife back. Like, that's not part of his motivation. His motivation is all about like, this is basically what he feels like he's here for. And and Mr. Glass is accurate when he says that, like, you're depressed because you don't feel like you're doing what you're meant to be doing.
Yeah.
I also think there's a good chance that he feels resentment toward his wife, for quote unquote making him quit football, even though that was his choice. Like,
I think you're right. I think on some level he definitely feels that.
Yeah.
And I think I'm so glad you pointed out the lady was in football, because I think that is part of his initial, like, I'm going for this with this woman.
Yeah.
Is that resentment towards his wife, that unspoken, like it never has to say that, it never has to spell that out for us, but I do think it's there.
Yeah. But you simultaneously see why he would be attracted to someone who was all about healing.
Yeah.
And like in a sense, she's actually right, because like he wasn't meant to do football. He's just really good at football because he's invulnerable.
Yeah.
But he was meant to help people, which is what she does.
Which is curious because, like, if he had not faked his injury, right? If he had gone, would he feel the same depression and discontent that he feels now? Because he still would not be doing the thing he was supposed to be doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably, like, if just my reading of the movie is yes, actually, like he wouldn't be using his like psychic gift to stop people from hurting people. So yeah.
There is an interesting kind of like side effect of this whole thing, though, is that like she is very anti-violence. She says this specifically. She can't imagine spending your life like inflicting violence upon other people. It is the opposite of what I do, she says. And that is kind of a life he's chosen for himself. Like I love the moment between David and his son at the end of the movie. I think it's this powerful, beautiful moment. I think it's shot wonderfully, like that scene where he's got the orange juice and the paper like slowly slides into frame. And the kid looks at it, and then he just mouths, "You were right," to him. And the kid starts crying. It's this beautiful moment. But in the background of this moment is his wife, who he has decided to hide all this from in the midst of their repairing of their relationship, and is going to be going out there inflicting violence on people. Bad people, mind you. But still something that she's not exactly going to be cool with. And that's like probably why he's not telling her.
Yeah, right. I mean... that on top of the fact that the whole thing sounds crazy, but yeah.
True. Yeah, true.
Yeah, I kind of want to go on two separate tangents from that, if that's okay.
Sure.
The first tangent goes back to my comment earlier about it being an anti-superhero movie, which is that his superhero costume is a green poncho.
Yeah.
Which is just like, there's nothing cool about it, but it somehow is kind of awesome. And it symbolizes, it's waterproof. It's basically repelling his weakness.
Yep.
So that makes sense.
And I think it gets, maybe I made this up. I feel like it gets a little greener as he goes through the scene and like accomplishes potential.
I think you're right because I think at first it doesn't even scan as being green. It just looks, it looks like dark gray.
Which I wonder if they just subbed out ponchos or if they just lit it a little differently to where it looks bright. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. And then the other tangent I wanted to go on was the ending quote unquote fight scene, which is it's so like brutal and it's just so unusual. I mean,
it's nothing, right? It's not a fight scene.
Exactly. He grabs the guy. I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into this because like now we're educated on lots of other movies and also, UFC and whatever, but like he clearly doesn't know how to fight. He just grabs the guy. He doesn't even really have him in a choke. He's just kind of holding on to him from behind. And the music is all doing kind of a this is a heroic moment thing, but he's basically just being smashed around the room until he gradually kind of wears the guy down, and then once again brutally snaps his neck with with like ample sound effects.
Yeah.
So the whole thing basically is this very primal. It is nothing like. It is nothing like a superhero punch fight in any other superhero movie ever.
No.
And that's definitely intentional, right?
Yeah, I think it's a very powerful moment. I actually get a little choked up in that moment because, first of all, the music is fantastic, especially in that one scene. It's like this triumphant realization. It's like if you would conduct what meeting your destiny or accomplishing your destiny in music form, I think it would be the music that's playing in the scene. It's so wonderful. And then the way it's done, he's not doing anything. He's just being shoved into the wall. The set decoration is great because it shows him taking chunks out of the wall, the drywall breaks and collapses. So you have a really good understanding of just how hard he's being punched into the wall. So it sells the fact that you're right. He's not actually fighting, but he's using his unbreakableness. He's using his power the way he can. He's Homer the boxer in that episode, right? Where he can just take shots to the head and that's how he wins. And that's exactly what he's doing. And it's this triumphant moment that is undercut by the woman being dead at the end. You're absolutely right. But I don't know. I love the mixture of everything in that scene. And it again is it's a M. Night Shyamalan stationary shot. The camera is kind of up in the corner of the ceiling, and it's just looking at him, and it doesn't move. It just observes this entire scene without moving. I think it's a oneer. I think there's 30 oneers in this movie. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Another cool thing about that whole sequence, everything revolving around the bedroom, is the involvement of those diaphanous curtains.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Where a big chunk of it is shot through the curtains, and then the guy attacks him through the curtains later. And it's all so the movie definitely has this motif of stuff being shot through, between the chairs, between curtains. I want to reach and compare it to the panels of a comic book, but it's that feels like a stretch. But there's definitely this thing where there's obstacles between the camera and what you're supposed to be looking at.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely frames it. I mean, there's a whole scene that takes place between iron bars. It's a really weird shot actually, because it's Elijah and David are at the stadium and they're talking, and it's a wide shot. They're really far away from the camera. You can't see either of their faces, and it's framed them between two iron bars on this grate, and it's 20 feet away. It's such an interesting shot. I don't, and it's stationary, and it doesn't cut. It's another oneer. It's an interesting way of doing it. And I think you're right. I think he's kind of going for comic book panels a little bit there.
Yeah. Now that you bring up, I mean, bars are an even more obvious way of portraying that. So yeah. I think that is what it is, honestly, which is cool. Yeah. And the thing is, I've never seen a filmmaker try to integrate the concept of comic book panels in a way that didn't just come off as stupid and distracting, but I actually love how it's done in this movie. Assuming that's what he was going for. I do like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even if it's not comic book panels, I mean, there's tons of framing devices around that. I'm thinking of the scene where they're talking at like the entrance to the stadium, or not the entrance, but like the ramp up to go into the seating area, where there's just like them on either side, and it's like blackness all around with just the single shard of light shooting through. I mean, like he does so much with framing and color in these scenes, and it's interesting because this was a different cinematographer than Sixth Sense. It was I think most of the crew was the same. I went and looked this up, but I think the cinematographer and the editor was different. So the movie does look different. Like this is a different looking movie than Sixth Sense, but you recognize his directing choices here, his framing, his camera work. It's just that like it's a little bit differently. He definitely has a different director of photography, but I love watching these back to back because it's like, oh yeah, look, he's doing this again and he's doing this again.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And that's good to know because it lets you kind of see like, yeah, this is definitely him. This is not like,
right.
You know, the cinematographer's hand that you're actually seeing because, yeah, he's doing so many of these techniques that he obviously likes to go to. And I feel like I'm repeating myself, but like we've said, you know, I think we even said in the last episode, like a oneer, to me, I don't usually, like there's no intrinsic reason why you should care that it's a oneer, right? It's like a part of you can appreciate like, oh, that's harder to do. But then I'm like, well, definitely don't just do it because it's harder to do. Do it because it has an effect. Like, you know, like a lot of the ones in Pulp Fiction, they have a specific effect that they're going for where you're being swept up in the scene more than you otherwise would be if it were cutting a lot. And all of the techniques Shyamalan is using, I think, are to a specific effect, and they're working usually. I can't really think of many that aren't actually working.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they, and this is something I want us to track as we go. I think in every single one in Sixth Sense, I was like, I see the definitive purpose of doing it this way. And I think in this movie, there were definitely some of them that I did, but there were some camera flourishes that I was like, were you just doing that because you wanted to? And I don't know if there's anything like specifically bad about that. But I wonder, like one of the things that like most people think that M. Night Shyamalan got worse as he went along. And I'm wondering if we are going to end up seeing like him get so into his style that the meaning behind it goes away and he's just doing it for the sake of doing it. And I'm not saying that happened in this movie. I'm just saying that my grasp on like, this is exactly why the camera moved this way in this scene. This is exactly why it cut this way. This is exactly why we did this camera move, this pull out, this push in, this pan. I felt that a little less in this movie.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think there's definitely certain scenes where I'm like, that was perfect. That was like, you know, the one where the camera is facing Samuel L. Jackson as the comic book store guy pushes him out and he repeatedly crashes his wheelchair into things.
Yeah.
That's perfect. That would it was so much improved by the fact that the camera is doing what it's doing, following along and staying in front of him. You know, if we're doing anything else, it would be nonsense. Or I mean, it wouldn't work as well. That's what I mean. But yeah, I think you're right that like the fisheye lens, I'm like, yeah, I can kind of make up a reason why that would be in there. But while you're watching the movie, it's purely distracting.
Yeah,
it's you're not like processing it subliminally while really staying with the characters. To me, that's what it's all about. Is like the camera movement and placement choices need to be permitting me to stay with the characters, and then injecting like subliminal cues into my mind about how I'm understanding what's happening.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, like thinking of this, and maybe this is what we can wrap up on, unless you had more stuff. Sorry, I don't want to jump ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just wanted to maybe say like I kind of what I said at the beginning of the show. Actually, like I do see some of the things in this movie that are the things that I least like about his style in his later movies, which I would call kind of when he drops the ball on mythologizing or has a character deliver a very on the nose bit of explication that is usually being delivered in a way that I also don't like. Like I almost feel like Haley Joel Osment ignored his directing and just gave an incredible performance, because there are a lot of performances across his later movies where someone is giving like the exposition of like the scene that the I See Dead People scene could have been, but it's much worse, and it always comes down to like some combination of the performance being I don't know what word to use. And I think the problem is that I'm mentally flickering between several different examples in the later movies, and they're all wrong for different reasons. But like the example in this movie, I'll stick to this movie, would be when Elijah's mom comes up to him.
Oh, that's exactly what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
I think I want to talk about that a bit, but I think the reason why, like, Samuel L. Jackson, I think, is really, really good at delivering exposition.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just one of his skills as an actor. Like, you overlook it because he has such a specific cadence to his lines.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, if you look at the Sam Jackson scene with the potential art buyer, he's doing the same thing. He's like, look at how much bigger the head of the villain is.
Uh-huh.
But then his mom like delivers the same thing, where it's like, that's the one you're talking about, right? When she's talking to David and she's telling him like about how the superheroes have bigger, or the villains have bigger eyes, and like the mastermind versus the it's the same conversation, right? I mean, basically it's doing the same thing, but it sounds so much more unnatural and forced coming from this actor than it did Sam Jackson.
Yeah, well, and because Sam Jackson's a huge weirdo. Right. I mean, that, or his character is. Well, he is too, I guess. But anyway, whereas his mom is supposed to be like a normal person, and it's like, why, like, a normal person wouldn't be talking this way, wouldn't be socially inept enough to think that Bruce Willis's character would care about this. Mm-hmm. You know, like that. I guess that's actually a lot of what it boils down to. I think I figured it out, is that it may not even be a problem with the delivery so much as a mismatch between the lines that need to be given and the character who's giving them. Because like all of his character, like I can buy Paul Giamatti's character being kind of weird, and I can buy the fish girl character in that movie being kind of weird and delivering lines in a way that comes off as weird because they're kind of otherworldly. But then when other characters in that same movie do the same thing, you're like, well, you shouldn't be talking like this.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You're supposed to be the normal person here.
Because like it made sense that Haley Joel Osment talked weird, because he's most of his dialogue comes from ghosts.
Yes. And it makes sense that Elijah would be talking weird, but not that his mom would be talking weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've cracked it.
I get that. Yeah, I get that. And that's, I think his dialogue is a little bit strange, right? Like his dialogue in general is different, and it works the best in characters that are different themselves. I think about the entire scene with the gun, when his kid has the gun.
Yeah,
and it's a really good scene. I think it's really tense. It's another oneer. There's no cutting, and the camera is handheld, so it's moving around like crazy between all the different characters, but the dialogue's a little goofy, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the thing, it's David's like, okay, you're right about me, but if you shoot me, I'm going to go away. And like, and his wife's Audrey's like, isn't that right? Like, friends don't shoot each other. Isn't that right, Audrey? And Robin Wright's line read here is like, no shooting friends.
Yeah.
No shooting friends, Joseph. And it's kind of goofy.
Yeah.
In this very, very tense scene.
Yeah, I guess this is one thing that I'll say is I love him as a storyteller, as a screenwriter in terms of writing the story, but sometimes I don't think I love him as a writer of dialogue.
Yeah, I could see that.
And this is a manifestation of that. So
yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, overall, wrapping up this movie, like looking at the similarities between The Sixth Sense, we have this idea of like strained relationships being brought back together, right?
Yeah.
that's something that obviously he's very interested in. Our next movie is Signs. That's kind of the same thing. And actually, if we get even more specific, we're going to have 3 movies in a row in which a man is brought to improved relationships with the help of a child. And I think that's something very specific that he's interested in.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty heart melting plot,
Right.
plot type. So yeah, I can't wait for The Sixth Sense.
Yeah. You mean Signs?
Yes. I don't know. Yes, Signs.
Yeah, and I guess it's a section where we say what M. Night Shyamalan's cameo was. This time it's a drug dealer.
Dealer.
He went from doctor to drug dealer.
Uh-huh.
Good job.
And then in later movies, he's a doctor and then a doctor.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, whatever. Okay.
I read that he cast himself as a doctor a lot because that's what his parents wanted him to be instead of a filmmaker, and so he's kind of like doing that for them.
That's hilarious. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, overall, so what is compared to Sixth Sense? You obviously like Sixth Sense better, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I'm there with you. The thing, like, there are individual scenes in this movie that I adore.
Yeah.
We didn't even talk about the weightlifting scene. I love that scene. I love the construction of that scene. I love the camera work in that scene. There are some camera flourishes he does in that I just think are like because he thought it was neat and had no purpose. Like when he's lifting the weight, the camera kind of attaches itself to the bar, and so it goes up and down with him as he's lifting, which that doesn't really need to be there, but it's cool looking. There are so many individual scenes in this movie that I love, but if I like zoom out and look at the movie as a whole, I just think The Sixth Sense is much tighter. It's much. I think it's a tighter script. I think it's a better idea just generally. I like the idea in the story a lot, but I think The Sixth Sense is just a better one. And that's not to say he's getting worse, right? It's just you usually start with like your best idea.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think he's getting worse. I mean, I absolutely love Signs, and I will brook no ill word about it.
I'm excited to talk about that one because both of these movies I've talked about recently. I went on Adrian's podcast and talked about The Sixth Sense, and then I had Elise watch Unbreakable for That of You, and we talked about that a bit. So I've talked about both these movies relatively recently. Haven't talked about Signs ever. I mean, formally, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what's coming up, and not like next, but next time on the Deconstructing Shyamalan series, we'll be talking about Signs. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah.
Doof. All right, Matt, let's talk about the Joker.
Yeah, let's do it.
So this week, the trailer for Todd Phillips' Joker movie came out. This is a movie that for the longest time, I couldn't believe was actually happening because it just sounds ridiculous. Todd Phillips is the guy who directed the Hangover movies, and he's making a serious film about the Joker starring Joaquin Phoenix. But the trailer came out. This movie looks really good, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I are on the same page here, where Joaquin Phoenix is going to be great.
The greatest living actor, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be great because Joaquin Phoenix is great. It doesn't look like a fun movie. It looks like a really uncomfortable, unpleasant movie.
Yes.
It's I guess this is under the DC umbrella. I have to assume.
Yeah, technically, yeah.
Yeah, like that's
they've basically given up on a continuity in their universe, more or less. So I don't know if this is going to tie into any of the previous movies in any kind of way. I don't think so.
Yeah, I would. I mean, it certainly seems not based on the trailer. It just kind of seems like, I mean, people are making the comparison of it's like a mixture of Taxi Driver and some other movie I haven't seen involving a guy who dresses up as a clown to rob banks. But I don't know that I don't actually. My read on the trailer is actually not that that's necessarily a really obvious take. Like I'm not getting Taxi Driver vibes because Taxi Driver as a character was like a violent person who just wanted to be noticed, and like was he's basically gonna shoot somebody for like literally no reason just because he thought it would like get him notoriety or whatever.
Sure.
Whereas this character in this trailer seems like a person who's just being shit on by life. So I don't think I buy that comparison. But anyway, it's the
Yeah, I don't know
trailer,
why
so.
people keep saying Taxi Driver. I mean, I think the King of Comedy is another. I think that's the one you're talking about where he dresses up and robs. Because the King of Comedy is about a stand-up comedian that gets frustrated with it and kidnaps someone and does a bunch of crimes. And I think this movie is going for Scorsese. Another thing I've heard people compare it to is The Killing Joke, which is the Joker story where like he was just a normal guy who got like beat down. I mean, it seems like it's going for that. Like he's a normal guy that got beat down by life and went a little crazy and then became the Joker. And it does seem like it's like a Scorsese riff on that. It's interesting. Like I never thought Todd Phillips would be trying to do Scorsese, but I guess you had to do something after The Hangover.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna try to stop a guy from trying to expand his range.
Yeah,
it is weird though.
Yeah. So, but this is what I want to get into though, because we're making a lot of assumptions about what we think the movie is based off of a 2-minute trailer. It was a 2-minute teaser trailer. It was mostly just tone and mood. It really didn't say much about what the story is going to be. And yet we have some think pieces out there that have decided that this take on the Joker is bad. It's exactly the kind of thing we don't need. Well, we have a tweet here, and I'm not going to read who it was by. I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but it's Joker, a film where you're supposed to sympathize with a mediocre white man radicalized into deranged violence, will no doubt be appealing to the wrong audience for the worst reasons. And this is frustrating to me, Matt. And this is kind of what I wanted to take this section into, because first of all, we don't know that that's true.
Right. We know nothing, especially the use of the phrase "no doubt."
Yeah.
It's like I doubt. I don't know.
Right.
I mean,
well, why is he mediocre too? Like I don't.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's not only is it premature, but it's reductive of the whole idea of like making art about people who the world shits on until they break, which is like, I don't know if I want to say most movies. That wouldn't be true, but like
it's not most movies, but it's a fairly common theme in storytelling because hey, living is hard.
Right. Life
is tough. The world shits on you a lot. And there's a lot of drama to be mined from that.
Yes, exactly.
And this is, I mean, a lot of this comes from the comparison to The Killing Joke, which is seen by a lot of people now as this kind of bastion of comic book movies radicalizing people in the worst kind of way. And I get that. Like I get that feeling. I get the reason why you see that and you want to say that. But we don't know what the movie is yet. Like the theme of the movie, the conclusion, the conceit of the film has not been revealed to us. We've seen 2 minutes of it.
I also don't think there's any evidence that movies have radicalized anyone into anything. I think that's at the very least completely lacking any actual evidence. It's more of a sentiment. I mean, that's what annoys me about this tweet is that it's basically an expression of like, fuck those guys over there. It's not. There's no like content to it, right?
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting question, and I think that goes down a rabbit hole I don't know if we want to go down. But is it like, because I mean we have seen alt-right people quote the Joker from the Dark Knight films and say, the present day society has proven that the Joker was right about everything, which is just hilarious because like. There's no read of those movies that say that the Joker was like something to be admired. But it's like, does that depiction of the Joker, does that depiction of Batman radicalize people, or does it just make people who already believe these things have a thing to point to in an incorrect read that says "see"?
I mean, I'm definitely going to say the latter one because he's just a character who. Within the text of the film, describes himself as an agent of chaos who's just trying to cause damage to society. Like that has no, or not just damage. He's not trying to cause damage to society. He's just trying to be chaotic and to basically break down the structure of the way people think the world is and make them feel unsafe.
Yeah.
And that's not like a political position. That's
No, but I think there's a certain amount of like internet trollism, right? That is pretty much in line with that kind of thinking, right? Where I just want to fuck with people for the sake of fucking with people, and take pleasure in that. But I don't think the Joker made those people. But I do think these feelings about that character in that movie echo a lot of sentiment that we see out there. Like I think South Park did that same thing too. And the question is the media responsible for it? Is the media just a reflection of it? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I guess it would be more responsible for me to say I don't know either. But I feel pretty strongly that like when I was a kid, I thought Jim Carrey's portrayal of the Riddler was like the most amazing thing ever. So like how much of this is like, oh yeah, Nolan was irresponsible to put the character of the Joker in that film because it radicalized people, and how much of it is just like young people are going to find things to think are cool and then smear whatever it is they already like onto those things via complete like meritless projection, and don't like censor your art because you think somebody's going to come along and use it as a flag.
And my thing is, like, at the end of the day, we don't know, right? Like, we've seen 2 minutes of this movie. We're jumping to conclusions about this thing that we don't know about. And, like, I 6 months from now, this movie could come out, and this movie does exactly what this person says. This could be a movie where you're supposed to sympathize with a mediocre white man who is radicalized into deranged violence. That could be the movie, and it could appeal to bad people, and bad people could say, yeah, fuck yeah, this is great. Those could be true statements, sure. But write that tweet and that think piece after the movie comes out. Make that argument after you know that is what the movie is saying. I'm kind of exhausted by how we treat trailers these days, because we did the same thing with the new Quentin Tarantino trailer, where people saw a 2-minute teaser trailer of Quentin Tarantino's new movie and decided that it was definitely going to be problematic for a wide variety of reasons. I think it was because Brad Pitt is like fighting Bruce Lee, and that like the implication is that he could beat up Bruce Lee. White man beating up Bruce Lee. And I'm just like, we didn't see anything.
Right. We don't know the context of any of that. We don't know if Tarantino is showing that to say this is awesome or showing it to say this is ridiculous, which is something he does very often, actually.
Yeah. And again, I'm not telling people that they can't write those think pieces. All I'm saying is, can we at least watch the movie first? Please. Because there's no reason why we have to sit here for 6 months and have arguments about whether or not this version of the Joker is a good thing or not when we haven't even seen the movie.
Yeah.
Like, let's have those arguments. Those are fair arguments to have. There are going to be people that have agreements. There are going to be people that agree with everything you and I have talked about. There are going to be people that disagree with everything you and I talked about. But can we wait? Can we just wait?
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking.
If you're going to make this think piece, make it about Breaking Bad.
Sure.
And then at least you'll have some text to refer to.
Right.
And then you don't have to use words like radicalized, which don't apply, because I'm pretty sure the word radicalized simply doesn't apply to Joker or Breaking Bad. It's just the wrong word. It's a word that's being used because it's a flag of this is the word we've agreed to use for certain things in 2019. And I'm just like, come on, like be specific with your language if you're gonna do things like this. It is annoying, and part of it is like this person knew that they could get clicks and retweets and shit by saying this. Like that's
right.
That's how it works. Like that's why they're saying it. Like that.
Yeah, I mean that's why we have these early takes, right? Because you get that take out there 6 months before the movie starts, and then you get attention to your take.
Right. I mean, I guarantee you, I could write a really shitty article about Joker right now, and it would get attention, right? Because it's like people are looking for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Why?
Yeah.
Why Joker is actually a pro-social justice movie.
Yeah.
I could probably write 600 words on that right now.
I actually thought I'm gonna say it on this. I'm gonna say it on air right now, and then maybe I'll do it again later anyway.
Okay.
But I've thought about writing like 2 essays that say exactly the opposite thing about a movie. Basically, just what you said. Write one essay about Joker actually being pro-social justice and extremely woke, and then another essay about it being an alt-right dog whistle. And commit to writing both essays fully and publish both of them and then publicize them separately and then just see what happens.
That would be an interesting experiment for sure.
Both under my name, of course, just to see like what is the dynamic that arises here. And not just as a troll thing. Like I'm genuinely curious like whether people would actually cause them to reflect on like, why am I reading this shit anyway?
Yeah. Especially since the movie hasn't come out yet.
Especially since the movie hasn't come out yet, exactly. Okay.
That's the Joker. I think the trailer looks great. I think it looks interesting. I've never watched The Killing Joke or read The Killing Joke. I have really no interest in doing that. But I am interested in this movie because I think Joaquin Phoenix is going to give a very passionate, complex, interesting performance that I think will elevate the movie, whether the directing is particularly good or not. Mm-hmm. And I am there for that. So, plus movies about how like the world, like isn't a movie about how the shittiness of the world drives people to behave in terrible ways about how you should stop being shitty to people? Isn't that the message of those type of movies normally?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's almost certainly what is in one's mind when one is making a movie like this, I would say.
And again, movie's not out yet, but I would be very surprised if the conceit of this movie is the Joker was justified in all the terrible things he did because people were bad to him. Like, I just don't see that. I just don't see that being the message of this film.
I mean, I agree. But if it is, then we can all agree, like, wow, that was dumb. I didn't like that.
Right.
But,
yeah, we can have that conversation after the movie comes out.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, go watch the Joker trailer and tell us what you think of it.
Tell us what you think of it without really making your opinions too strong one way or the other.
Yeah. Just don't conclude on the entire movie without just from this one trailer.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that is all we had for you this week. I'm decided to punt our conversation about a recommendation to next week because we've been going on for a little too long.
Okay,
but
all right.
That's all we have for you guys this week. If you have any opinions or want to say anything about Unbreakable or the Joker or any of the stuff we just said, you can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on our Twitter account at doofmedia.
Yeah, if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And you can find all the other shows we do over at our website, doofmedia.com. You can check out Vow to View, which is a show I do with my wife where we make each other watch movies. This week I made her watch Revenge of the Nerds, and that was a mistake, Matt. Some movies don't age well. I learned that.
Yeah, I think I've heard of that movie.
You want to talk about some problematic movies?
Uh-huh.
There's one.
Okay. All right. That sounds exciting.
Yeah. If you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. Head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and pledge $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. This helps ensure we keep growing, keep making new content. It defrays the cost of hosting these shows, of buying and seeing the movies and books and TV shows and everything we're talking about. So we really appreciate your support. It means so much to us, and it's how we get to keep doing this.
Yeah. Also, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Every review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, guys. We will see you all next week. It was the kids. They called me Mr. Glass. That's a spot-on Samuel L. Jackson impression, and I don't care what you have to say.
That was perfect.
It.
Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.